It's time for Real Estate 101 with the Karey Brown team from Realty Executives Preferred Advisors.
Good Sunday morning to you. This is Karey Brown, broker owner of Realty Executives Preferred Advisors here in Topeka, and you're listening to Real Estate 101. Today I'm here with Patrick Gordon, and we know him as Dr. Radon. Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning, Karey.
Patrick's been on the show before, so we're going to discuss several things that we have before and some new things. He's a great guy. We spend a lot of work his way because we trust his readings, and he's real good about educating, and we really like the work that he does. So one of the things that most people don't realize whenever we're doing a contract, and we created a magazine that kind of walks through the things that happen during a transaction so that our buyers and our sellers kind of have a leg up. They know what's going on. But one of the things that we do when we're under contract is radon inspections. And I'm going to have Patrick tell you a little bit about how all that works, the machines and the readings, and just to have him explain that real quick.
Thank you, Karey. The most common way that radon tests are done, generally there's two. When you call me, and we'll go out and use an electronic measuring device, or people go down to the county extension office and pick up one of the charcoal tests. Both are equally accurate. For a real estate transaction, 48 hours is the standard. It's the EPA minimum for a test. Obviously, because real estate's time sensitive, we need to get it done as quickly as possible. But both are equally accurate. The only downside to the charcoal test is that it is sent off to a lab, so there's a lag time there of about a week. The way it works is the test is placed in the home, and all the instructions are in the charcoal test on how to suspend it, where it needs to be in the airstream in the home, and then, of course, when we as professionals, licensed professionals, do the test, we set them up in that area that the EPA requires. Then the test left there for 48 hours, and then it's read. We get our readings from those.
And our reports show by the hour, isn't it, what the gauging is?
Correct. The test reads once an hour and then automatically calculates it for the average for the 48-hour period.
And the EPA average standard should be?
The EPA standard, 3.9 and below. Right now, 4.0 is the action level by the EPA. There has been talk, the World Health Organization, lowering that worldwide to 2.6, but right now it is 3.9. The EPA says that 0.4 to 0.6 is normal in homes, with the national average being 1.3, and that's measured in picocuries per liter of air.
So basically, this is a question that I always wonder. Whenever we go under contract and we do the home inspection, do the radon inspection, and say, for instance, the radon is fine at that time, should you check more than once a year? Does that ever drastically change?
Yes. I wouldn't say drastically. It's going to vary home to home. The recommendation wouldn't be necessarily more than once a year, but to do a long-term test that covers more than one season. As the conditions outside and the conditions in the ground change, you can get varying levels of radon in the home, especially ones that have not been mitigated. And for that, you would really get away from the charcoal tests and move to an alpha track test, which are available at Home Depot or online. They're also sent off to a lab, but we call that a long-term test, which starts at as short as 90 days and as long as a year. And what that does, mathematically, a larger sample is going to give you a better average. And I recommend that to anyone who's interested in knowing what their home looks like as far as radon goes, and they're not under the time constraints of a real estate transaction. I tend to try to push folks towards a longer-term test.
Basically, you just go to Home Depot or Lowe's and ask them, what would they ask them for?
They would ask specifically for a long-term radon test. They can also go right online to Amazon. I know a lot more people shop online these days, so you can buy them right off Amazon as well.
So, Patrick, tell us what radon is.
What radon is odorless, colorless gas that's naturally occurring. It is produced as a decay product of uranium, which is naturally occurring in the ground, as we know. As uranium breaks down, or as any radioactive isotope breaks down, it gives off generally 3 types of radiation, which is alpha, beta, and gamma. With radon falling into the alpha spectrum, which is what we consider a particle. It's you can't see it, but it is still a particle. And as it breaks down, it gives off these radioactive pulses, and that's what's dangerous to our body, is the pulse of energy. All 3 of those types of radiation are ionizing, which is what makes them mutagenic to the body, in that they affect the cells in one of 3 ways, and we'll get to that. But the way it works is we breathe in this radon. It's electrostatically charged, so it has a desire to stick to our lung tissue, and that's where we start with the problems. And there's really 3 scenarios that happen when the decay, continues in the lungs and it's giving off these short bursts of energy. One is that the lung cells are struck and they die. Not that big of a problem. Our lungs are continuously regenerating. So there's not a problem there. Second scenario is the lung cell doesn't die, but it's damaged, and in that regeneration process, it fixes itself. And the third and most dangerous is a cell's damaged and it can't repair itself. And then as that damaged or mutated cell regenerates, like the lungs do, it continues to regenerate mutated, which is cancer. And that's where we get to, the lung cancer side of it. The EPA estimates that there's 20,000 deaths a year by radon-induced lung cancer, second only to smoking. And that a fact about lung cancer is that 92% of people who contract lung cancer die, and most of those are within 2 years. So that's really how radon works on the body, and what it is from the most basic level, the nuclear level.
I know when we're in a real estate transaction, there's a lot of money transacting. You've got your home inspection, you've got your sewer inspection and your radon inspection, and those things add up. And a lot of times people don't budget for all of those tests. If you don't do it during the actual transaction, it is something that you definitely want to do as a homeowner after the fact. The difference is you lose your right to leverage that in a real estate transaction. You could ask the seller to pay for those repairs if the level is too high. So you do lose that leverage once you're done. Once you're closed, it's your house. And it's not something that the typical homeowner would even know that they have. Most people have never even tested for it or even felt the need to test for it. It's another thing that people will say, oh, well, it can kill you. And I've had clients say, well, everything can kill you. It's a health hazard. And you definitely, especially in the basement level of your house, you definitely want to know, if you've got kids living in your basement, what is your radon level? It's something you need to think about. So even if you don't do it in the transaction, we know money's tight, but it's definitely something you need to do. If you're not even looking to sell your house, it's still something you need to do. You need to know that information. It's kind of like carbon monoxide. It's not, you wouldn't live in that. You want to know, you want to have a test that would trigger that. Let's talk about the machines themselves. Can you explain how those work?
That's a great question, Karey. The basic premise of radon mitigation is that we take that radon gas from the soil beneath the home and get it outside where it can be diluted by natural air and carried away, continue on its half-life process, and essentially dissipate. There's 2 basic mitigation techniques that we use, in Kansas because our home styles are so similar. And one is that we use a sump pump pit to access the subslab, and the other is coring a hole in the floor for homes that don't have a sump pump pit, or that we need to locate the system away from the sump pump pit, whether it be because goes under a deck or is on the street side, and we don't want to put those things on the front of the house. But the basis of it is that we access the subslab either by coring a hole in the floor and taking a small auger in there and making a pit, a suction pit, or we put a cap, a durable yet clear cap so you can still see your sump pump over the sump pump pit. We route our pipe into that pit, and then outside, either via the outside of the home or routing through the home or through the garage into the attic, place a fan on it that draws continuous suction to create low pressure underneath the house and a pathway for the radon to travel to, and then per the EPA standard of mitigating above the eave of the home to get the radon up and away from where people will be breathing it.
On the machine itself, I like to call it the little spaceship. My clients laugh at me, but it's shaped like a little circular object, and it's a fan that runs. You also have a little detector on that kind of shows if it's working properly. Can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. It's called a U-tube manometer. It is a U-shaped tube of plexiglass, and it's filled to a preset level. I'm sure it's all gradiated. I don't know how. I mean, it comes all pre-marked. And it's filled with a liquid. It's actually just colored vegetable oil. So if you have one in your home and it gets broken, there's nothing to worry about. It's just vegetable oil. Give a radon professional a call and they can come replace it. But what we do is we take a small flexible piece of tube and put it into one leg of that U that's facing up. The other end gets a hole drilled into the pipe, and that goes into the pipe. And what that does is create a suction on the material inside the U-tube, raising one side up, indicating that the system's running. The technology we have today, the fans are very quiet. A quality fan will be very quiet. And in some instances, especially if it's drilled into the floor, you won't even be able to hear it run from inside the home. With Dr. Radon, we use quiet vent technology from Radon Away, and they're incredibly quiet and durable.
Yeah, you really can't hear them at all. I've put my hand on it, and you can feel it, but you can't hear them.
No, they're incredible.
So if you have a slab home, do you need to worry about radon?
Absolutely. We've mitigated slab homes in the past. It's less common because you don't have that pit, if you will, that would be a basement for the air to stagnate and collect, but it's certainly not unheard of. I recommend testing. The EPA recommends testing all homes every 2 years, for the reason of safety, like you spoke about.
Yeah, and the weather does affect the radon readings. That's what we've been told. So, like if there's snow on the ground or excessive rain, how does that work exactly?
That works by essentially capping the ground. Snow is a great example. Maybe easier to explain than the rain, but in the summer months, we get a drought and the ground cracks. Even with the air conditioner running, the radon's pathway to air is generally going to be much more free in the middle of the yard, instead of trying to go up against that slab and find the little bitty cracks that we get in it. Whereas you get snow on the ground, and that creates a physical barrier. We get a lot of rain, and it tightens up the ground because it fills in all those cracks in the dirt. Once again, creates essentially a cap of dirt. And you combine that with running an HVAC system, and you start changing the pressure levels in the home when the radon can't escape around the home, and that's when we'll have times when it flows in. And that's where, as we spoke about before, a long-term test, if you're outside of a real estate, transaction, is really the way to go to get a snapshot of a longer-term average. If one day we have 12, but more frequently you're at 1, you can average that and figure out just how much help your home may need or may not need.
Is there a type of soil that is more prone to the uranium?
My understanding is it's really regionally based. I wouldn't say a type of soil, but the location in the United States. We have pockets, we have areas where it's higher. here in Topeka, if we see a high number, it's generally around 12 with a mitigatable average of, 5 to 6 has been my experience. And then there's areas where they'll see 30 picocuries per liter, as where they're getting their mitigation average from. And, it's just all just based on what's down in the ground and how it's getting out of the ground.
Yeah. I know we've seen several around town that have been like, wow, that's the highest I've seen so far.
There's some that are surprising.
Yeah. I know we've had a couple that, and one in particular, it still kind of boggles my mind. The lady did smoke. She did die of lung cancer, but her radon test was like 22 whenever we did it for the new transaction. So it was really, really high. That
is exceptionally high for Topeka, for the Northeast Kansas area. And not to change the subject from the radon levels and the uranium levels in the ground, but that is one thing the EPA puts out, that the combination of smoking with radon exposure exponentially raises the chances for lung cancer, which, should go without saying, or maybe shouldn't, not to be too basic, but, if you can reduce one or both, ideally, it greatly lowers the risks.
Yeah. Of course, in that particular instance, it would be argumentative to say, okay, well, which one did it? But she had a double whammy. Whenever we mitigated it, it mitigated down to like 0.2. So it really boils down to, I'm sure she didn't know. Obviously, if you smoke, you do run that risk. It's on all the packages. But to not know that there was radon there, that happens more often than not. So it's just because, up until just a few years ago, it wasn't even in our contract. It was something that kind of just got hit the highlight and move on, or even wasn't even discussed. Now it is. It's a part of our job to educate you about it. I know whenever we start working with buyers, part of our emails we send out is information about radon so that they have the opportunity to read it. It's kind of a hard read. You'll definitely need a nap before you get started with that pamphlet, but it's pretty educational if you can get all the way through it. It's definitely something you want to know. Same thing with lead-based paint. All those things are government advised. You have the standards that are set. But radon is definitely one to be thinking about, especially if you have never checked it. We do live in an area that has it.
To caveat on that, the pamphlet, the EPA does have the pamphlet for, the effects of radon, or radon basics for homeowners, and radon in real estate transactions, and they are kind of a hard read. Anybody that doesn't want to go out and read those full pamphlets, or people that maybe aren't in the market to sell their home right now, K-State here is our scientific radon headquarters, if you will, from the state level. And if folks want to Google, Shawnee County Extension, it'll take them to the Extension Office website, and they have an indoor air quality link on the left side, which takes them to K-State's website about indoor air quality and radon, and they have some great PDFs, which are much of what's in those pamphlets, kind of condensed and laid out more simply.
More layman terms, maybe that's what we should be sending clients.
Possibly.
Yeah.
They're really great. They get to the bottom of most questions. And then, of course, if folks still have more in-depth questions, and there's a lot of people that I run into that have done a lot of research, and they have questions that I'm sometimes have to get back with them on because, that people do great research, which is awesome. And then they come up with some questions that are, more advanced. And that's where, on that website, there's a frequently asked questions area. And, if they don't find their answer there, they can certainly contact myself. And once again, if I don't have the answer, I'll get a hold of the scientists, the big brains at K-State. And they always have the answer.
Yeah, I know we've had several, like for instance, one was, does the fan dry out the foundation? And there was someone's cousin's brother's uncle that told him, yeah, well, it'll dry out your foundation will collapse, all that good stuff, probably not even someone educated in the field. And the answer to that question was?
Per the engineer that I contacted, anything is possible, but no. No, that's not going to happen. I don't remember what he said about how many years would have to go without moisture for that to even
it was a lot.
Become a possibility before it would even potentially happen, because it's reinforced concrete. And no, we get moisture fairly regularly here in Kansas, and therefore we get moisture underneath the slabs of our homes, and we're not going to dry it out to the point that it's going to cause any damage. Now, there are studies being done on the upsides of damp basements with the radon systems, because they will pull moisture out, some moisture, actually helping damp basements. You know, if they don't have a water control system in there that's quite adequate, you know, it also helps. But no, the engineers I spoke with said no.
Yeah, we like to go to the educated sources. Not to say that you shouldn't be concerned. I know we had Eric Keating on the show, and he went into great detail about the drought and how that affected a lot of homes that had never had any movement at all. But we had, craters in the yards from how dry it was, and that will affect your foundation. So whether or not that really happened to this particular fella or not, we'll never know. But, I mean, it was a good question, and it was definitely a concern. And Patrick got right on it and got us the answer. So basically, if you are looking to test for radon, again, strongly suggest that you do. Patrick, how can they get a hold of you?
They can email me at dr.radon@yahoo.com. You can call me at 785-215-3776. And we can also be reached at the website, which is www.dr.radon.org. And there's a link on there to contact me and get right back to those. Any questions anybody has regarding radon, or potentially even indoor air quality with mold or anything else. I'm not a mold specialist, but the people that we work with at K-State obviously work very closely with them.
And like I said, we use Dr. Radon a lot. Patrick has been really good. It's not very often that we call anyone else. Not that they aren't perfectly capable. It's just we have gotten to where we know his work and we know how quickly he can get us taken care of. And his reports are very easily read. And if, we have a need to mitigate, he's on it and can get that done right away. Tell us a little bit how the systems are maintained.
Well, in addition to retesting your home every 2 years, the maintenance on the system is actually very minimal. We like to put the YouTube manometer in a place where people hopefully, go to once or twice a month, and they can just give it a quick glance. And that's going to be really the first bit of maintenance, is just making sure it's running. Outside of that, the system, the fans themselves are warranted for 5 years. And then, as you know, we warranty our work for the life of the system, barring any major remodels or anything on the home. Maintenance outside of that really is just standard maintenance on a sump pump if you have one. That's why I put the clear cover on. Folks can go in, look down in there, make sure everything's operating as it should, dump some water in if they need to. And beyond that, like anything with the outside of a house, if they're painting, maybe check the caulking around the electrical connections and where the fan penetrates. The systems are pretty maintenance-free, and with the radon away fans, we've had great success and very minimal maintenance.
And people can do these themselves, correct? Have you seen them actually? I know we've in the past seen where someone did it themselves and accidentally put the pipe that comes out of the house right under a window. And that's why I bring that up. Yes.
There's no law preventing folks from mitigating themselves. There is a lot of information online on how to mitigate, what a system looks like. Things I caution against, the most common ones are, 1, improper placement, as you experienced, and 2, and I had 3 instances last year where people put the fan in the basement in the home, and the fan cannot go in a living space. And the reason being that if the boot were to come loose or something like that, they'd be dumping the air right back into the house, most likely in a higher concentration. Outside of that, there's a lot of resources out there, and there's the materials that we use are readily available.
Yeah. I know in that particular instance, even to pipe it up through the roof from where he placed it, it literally was right in the center of a window. So I think it technically ended up costing him just about as much just to have somebody come out and correct it. So it's the same thing with selling real estate. It's not that you can't do it yourself, but there's a lot that goes into it that most people don't realize take place. And when you're messing with a chemical like that, or a natural gas that's going to dump right back into your house, you kind of want to do it right. Same thing with buying a house. You really kind of want to do it right because it's going to cost you a lot of money over time if you don't. Let's talk about credentials. What is the credentialing that you have?
The credentialing that I have, all mitigators and inspectors in the state of Kansas are required to be licensed for each one of those. Not everyone is licensed for mitigation. Most home inspectors have their inspector's license. And then if they're going to mitigate, you have to go one step further and get the Kansas license for mitigation as well. I also am a member of the American Association of Radon Scientists and Technicians and the National Radon Proficiency Program. Both of those programs, one program, one association, do a lot for raising awareness for radon. They do a lot of work for the research on radon, and they're both great programs, in my opinion, to be members of.
So one more time, tell us again how to get a hold of you.
I can be emailed at dr.radon@yahoo.com. You can reach us by phone at 785-215-3776 or visit us on the website at www.dr.radon.org.
Thank you so much for coming out today.
Thank you very much for having me again.
And again, this is Karey Brown, broker, owner of Realty Executives Preferred Advisors, and you've been listening to myself and Dr. Radon, also known as Patrick Gordon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Real Estate 101 with the Karey Brown team from Realty Executives Preferred Advisors. Tune in again next Sunday at 11 o'clock for Real Estate 101.